Welcome to this video. We're going to talk about performing calculations and keeping our sig figs as part of the conversation, right? You're having a conversation and sig figs say, here we go, here we are. You're like having a nice conversation and you're talking about what you did this weekend and you're like, oh, I saw Justin Bieber. So Justin Bieber with the hair. And, you know, everyone else is talking about what they did. Oh, maybe they got a Christmas tree or something. And sig figs are all alone over here. Like, I want to be part of the conversation. Sig figs. But they're kind of sad, right? Sad sig figs. So here they are. They're sad because they're not part of the conversation. But we're going to bring them into the conversation. Hey, sig figs, welcome. Welcome to the group. So let's turn that frown upside down, right? Here we go. Happy sig figs now. Okay. Here we go. What better introduction than that? Nothing else to say. Let's say you have a question like this. Calculate x and express it with the correct number of significant figures. And you're given an equation for x. Now we're told that x is 2.00 times 10 point divided by 5.000. This example will teach us the rule for multiplication, and division. Now here's the thing. You calculate this out. 2 times 10, that's 20. 20 divided by 5 is 40. So you know the answer, 20 divided by 5 is 4. So you know the answer is 4. But is the answer 4 or 4.0 or 4.00? How many zeros should we have? Should we have none? To figure that out, you look at the original values you were given. Look at the 2.00, look at the 10 point, and look at the 5.00. When you are multiplying and dividing, here's our rule. You list the number of sig figs each of these has. 2.00, that has 3 sig figs. 10 point, that has 2 sig figs. 5.000, that has 4 sig figs. So you list the number of sig figs, and then you round your answer to the least of these number of sig figs. So 2, 3, 4, what's the least? 2 is the smallest. So you round this answer to 2 sig figs. It'll be those two. This is a 0, so I can leave that as 4.0. I don't have to round it up. So my final answer is 4.0. Okay, let's see an example using the rule for addition and subtraction. Rule for addition and subtraction. Calculate y, express it with the correct number of significant figures. And you know what? Let's make this just so that let's change this from plus 11 to minus 11. Just so we're doing both. Okay, here's the new problem. How do we find, well, first you calculate your answer, right? So you get out the calculator, Mr. Buttons, 1.00 plus 0.5 minus 11. Whoops. Plus 0.5 minus 11. Have I done this correctly? Let's see. 1.0 plus 0.5 minus 11. Enter. It's negative 9.5. So y is negative 9.5. But do we have to round that to negative 10? Do we have to make it negative 9.50? Do we have to add 2 O's, 3 O's? What's the correct answer? Well, to figure it out, here's what you do. You line up these three terms the way that we learned to when we were first doing addition and subtraction with decimals. Whoops, not that way. Line the decimal point, so every value has the decimal point in the same spot. Okay. And then you figure out, of these three, Well, here's the last sig fig for the first value. Here's the last sig fig for the second value. And here's the final sig fig for the third value, the rightmost sig fig. Right, so for each of these values, there's some sig fig which is farthest right. I've circled that sig fig which is farthest right with green. Okay, circled it with green. And then you look at those green circles and you say, which of those green circles is farthest to the left? Right? And it's this one. So you have to round your final answer to this place, to the 10th place. That means I have to round to this place. I look at the next digit to the right. That's less than 5. So I do not round up. I leave it as negative 9.5. And that's how you do it. I want to explain this one again using another description. Okay, here's another one where we're doing the rule of adding and the rule of sig figs for adding and for subtracting. You've got to find y, express it with the correct number of sig figs, and the first step is just to calculate the value of y. So you do all this on the right side, that plus that minus that, but then you're going to have to subtract 110 from both sides to get y by itself. So let's do the calculation. 558 plus 12 minus 0.5, and then we had to subtract 110 from both sides, minus 110, so we have to subtract it from the right as well. And it's 459.5. 459.5. But where do you round? Is it 0.500? 0.5 just for 0.5? Do we have to round this to 460? Okay, let's figure this out. First, again, we line up these three values, which we're adding and subtracting together. So you've got 110. There's no decimal point there. 558. Again, no decimal point. 12.00. And 0.5. And we can show we're subtracting this, adding that, subtracting this. Okay, here's another way to think about this type of problem. When adding and subtracting, you have to figure out which of these values that you're adding and subtracting, which one is the least precise. And by precise I mean, which one is rounded to the least precise, to the biggest place. This one is rounded to the tens place. This is rounded to the units place, the ones place. This is rounded, this number 12 is rounded to the hundredths place, and this number 0.5 is rounded to the tenths place. So which one is rounded to the biggest place? Well, it's 110. What place is it rounded to? Well, the significant figure, the last significant figure, is the tens place. So you add this all up, subtract, and so forth. You get 459.5, and then you round your answer to the tens place, right here. So you look to the right, that's bigger than 5, right? So you add 1, make that change it from 450 to 460. I can't put a decimal place because now if I do that, I'm rounding to this place and not this place. I need it to be rounded to the tens place, so I just leave it as 460. Okay, finally we're going to try a problem where we have to do both rules together at the same in one problem. Okay, calculate m, express it with the correct number of significant figures. Now, the first thing we do, as always, is we calculate the value of m just correctly, the way we normally would. So first I'm going to subtract 10 to get rid of the 10. Subtract 10 from both sides. 10 minus 10 is 0. 38 minus 10 is 28. And that's equal to m over 4. Now what do? I multiply both sides by 4. So I multiply both sides by 4 over 1, right? The 4's cancel out because 4 over 4 is 1. And what's 28 over 4? Do a little mental math. Well, 20 times 4 is 80. 8 times 4 is 32. 80 and 32 makes 112. Let me just double check. 28 times 4, 112. Now, the question again is it 112.0, 112.00? Do we have to round it to 110? Do we round it to this place and make it 110? Do we round it to this place and make it 100? Well, to figure it out, we have to solve the problem a second time. And when we solve it a second time, we have to use Sig Figs in every single step. So here's what I mean. M over 4.00. The first thing I do is I take 38 minus 10.00. If I do 38 minus 10.00, my subtraction rule says line these up, figure out which one is rounded to the biggest place. 38 is rounded to the bigger place. This is rounded to the ones place, the units place. That right there, 10.00, is rounded to the hundredths place. So I need to round the answer, whatever this is. I have to round it to the tens place. So let me calculate and round. It's 28 is what I get. M over 4 is 28. And let me add some zeros to show my rounding. And then I said I have to round to the tens place. I have to round to the units place rather. I have to round to the units place because that's what this one is rounded to. So I have to round to here. I look over to the right. This value, this digit is less than 5, so I don't need to add 1. I keep it as 28. Like this. Then we have to multiply both sides by 4, right? So now I say M is 28 times 4.00. And what do I do with multiplication? I count the number of Sig Figs. This has 2 Sig Figs. This has 3. I'm not lining up the decimal place, I'm just counting. And so when I get my final answer of 112, 112.0, let's add some zeros to show the rounding process. I say, okay, of these givens, of these values here, the one with the least number of Sig Figs is 2 Sig Figs. This has 3. So I round my answer to just 2 Sig Figs, those two. And so my mass then, my value of M rather, is going to be 110, right? Why did I make it 110 and not 120? Well, I'm rounding to this place. I look to the right. This digit is less than 5, so I do not add 1. I leave it as 110, not 120. So that's your final answer. The key in these problems is solve it twice. Solve 2 times. These are a little tricky. They take some work. They take some thought. But we will get them down with some practice.